October 1st, 2017. Are we on? 2017 Town of Shelburne Development Review Board meeting. Calling the meeting to order. This is the time on our agenda when we invite folks to make a public comment with respect to any issues they have that are within our jurisdiction. We don't typically get comments, but I always ask. Seeing no one raising their hand, I'll assume that there is no one who wishes to make a public comment. I would just ask that folks sign in, especially if they think they might be speaking this evening, so we have a record of who's here. First matter on our agenda is approval of the minutes of two meetings, one October 18, 2017, the other October 25, 2017, which was a site visit. The first being the October 18th meeting. Does anyone have any changes or edits to the minutes of that meeting? Hearing none, I'll take a motion for approval of the minutes of the October 18, 2017 meeting.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next is the October 25th meeting, which was on Falls Road, site visit for, what is it, Sterling? Is the name of the applicant?
Yes.
Does anyone have any additions or edits to the meeting minutes for the October 25th site visit? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, the motion carries. The next matter on our agenda this evening are three design review applications. The first is DR 17-17. It's the La Platte Partnership. It's an application for approval of a freestanding sign. The applicant is La Platte Partnership and Richard Fox. Is there anyone here in connection with that application?
Yes, ma'am.
Want to come forward, please, and give us your name?
So I am the Richard Fox of whom you just spoke.
Okay, can you raise your right hand,
Certainly.
please, sir? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with this proceeding?
I do.
And so, Mr. Fox, can you tell us about what you're doing?
Quite simply, there are two law offices that occupy the first floor of the property at 181 Falls Road. Those two offices are seeking to emplace a freestanding sign as per the application you have before you. The purpose of the sign, as you might imagine, is to make it clear to clients where we are, because it does otherwise look like a residential property. So they're trying to be clear for our clients and also make it known that we're there, but at the same time be respectful of the community and respectful of the historic standards by which we've already met the previous week. And so you have before you a fairly, I would argue, straightforward design, two images, two logos, set back from the roadway outside of setbacks and right-of-ways.
Does anyone from the board have any questions of Mr. Fox? Anything staff wishes to add? Okay. In that case, I'll make a motion to grant design review approval of application DR 17-17 for a new freestanding sign at 181 Falls Road, with the condition that you obtain a permit for your sign before you install it.
Certainly.
Is any opposition or discussion on the motion? No one's yet. I'm about to ask. May I have a second to the motion?
So second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, sir, for coming
Thank
in. The next matter is a design review application by Susan Spillane and Mendy Mitigee. I hope I'm saying that right. It's the applicant seeks design review approval for a new freestanding sign outside their store. Is there anyone here to speak to this? Seeing none. Does anyone have any questions? All right, I'll take a motion, unless anyone has anything to discuss about the sign. I'll make a motion to grant design review approval of application DR 17-18 for three new freestanding sign panels at 30 Harbor Road, with the condition that a permit be obtained before construction. Can I have a second to the motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. None opposed, motion carries. The last is a design review application by the Town of Shelburne and the Veterans Committee. The applicant seeks design review approval for the amendment to the Veterans Memorial Plan for the removal of 6 Korean maple trees surrounding the monument. Is anyone present this evening to testify about this application? Can I have your name, sir?
Okay, Sam Feidelberg, Chair of the Veterans Committee.
Mr. Feidelberg, could you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in connection with your application for design review?
I do,
Thank you.
okay,
What would you like to add?
yeah, up to it. Well, we gave you reports,
Yep.
and if you have questions on it, we have here the committee that would be charged with the responsibility of removing the trees, bagging them, and the tree committee would relocate them somewhere appropriately within the Shelburne mapping.
Does
And,
anyone from the board have any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, I don't have any questions. I think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
Yep. So if there's no discussion or anybody in the audience who has anything to add, I'll move to grant design review approval of application DR 17-19 for an amendment to the Veterans Memorial Plan for the removal of 6 Korean maple trees with the condition that the committee will return to the HP and DRC, the Historic Preservation and Design Review Committee, within 12 months to present an updated Veterans Memorial Plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. Oh, second, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving quickly this evening. The next is the application by Sterling Land Company LLC for sketch plan review of a proposed 4-lot, 6-unit subdivision. This is a carryover from our October 18th meeting. The properties are located at 25 and 39 Irish Hill Road in the Shelburne Falls Mixed Use District and a portion of the residential district, as well as the floodplain and water course overlay districts. Is there anyone in the audience this evening to speak with respect to this application? Okay, let's see, we'll start with you, Andy, if that makes sense, if you, or does it not?
No, I thought you were gonna swear everybody in.
Oh, not all together tonight. We'll see. Can you raise your right hand, Andy? You swear or affirm that the testimony you should give this evening or may give this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you state your name for the record and make sure you have the mic?
Andy Rowe with Leonard Dickinson.
Certainly.
One set's already off.
Still, I think we need, it's not visible, so we need to fix it.
Hit the other one, Dave. Kill that one.
Yeah.
Hit the other one. Turn
The wrong ones
Turn
were
the
off.
other one back on. Nope, the other side, the other switch. Turn that switch on, turn that one off. Try that.
There we go, it's a little bit better. Okay. Okay, Andy, go ahead.
So this is the continued sketch plan hearing for a 4-lot subdivision involving 3 new duplexes off Irish Hill Road following the site visit last week. I guess how would the board like to proceed? We had a little bit of an overview before.
Based on the site visit, have you made any changes at all to the application?
We have not at this time, no.
Does anyone have any questions of Andy?
Any questions?
Questions or comments or anything to
Sure.
say with respect to this application?
Absolutely. So, thank you for the site visit. It was most useful. I would like to see the house next to Falls Road if that distance could be increased. I think you're at the minimum 30 feet right now.
Correct.
Yeah, that one right
We've
there.
got the minimum 30-foot front yard setback between the edge of the Irish Hill Road right-of-way and Unit A. And as we had talked about a little bit at the last hearing, the northerly edge of the footprint, as it's shown here, does have some leeway to the edge of the building envelope.
Yeah. I think if you could utilize that leeway, it would be good, just to shift it away from the road. It's a busy road, hate to see something bad happen there.
I agree. I felt even closer in the field.
Yeah.
Is there a sidewalk plan to be installed, Andy?
Dean Pierce gave us an update on that when we met with the Natural Resources Conservation Committee. The town had submitted a grant application and was unfortunately
Right.
unsuccessful with the grant application. I think it's probably still on the town's to-do list. It probably fell down in terms of priorities with the lack of the grant funding. But the applicant does support the construction of a sidewalk up Irish Hill Road across the frontage of this property, and with the 30-foot wide front yard setback, at a minimum, with the building being moved back as suggested, there's plenty of room to construct a sidewalk, whether it be within the right-of-way or just outside the right-of-way.
Yeah, I'm looking at you for sidewalk. I'm-
So, since it's not a PUD, they're not doing a site plan review. So all that, the pedestrian access, still something to consider, but a little less language behind it to require it.
Let me see if I had any other questions. Have you obtained a project review sheet from A&R yet?
We have requested one, but have not obtained one yet.
Does anyone else have any questions from the board? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to add anything, either the applicant or folks? Okay, I know that there's a neighboring landowner. Sir, I can't remember your name, if you would come.
My name is Scott Swanborn.
Okay, you have to come up and get the mic. Mr. Swanborn, are you going to give testimony or just ask questions? Comments or questions?
I have a
only?
request and maybe questions.
Okay, so let's just be safe. Raise your right hand. You swear affirm that any testimony you should give this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can I have your name again, please, sir?
Scott Swanborn. I'm in the property just up the street.
For
next-
our minute
adjacent.
taker, could you spell your last name, please?
Swanborn.
And why don't you proceed? Do you have questions of the applicant or comments?
Well, I guess comments, maybe a request. I'm not sure if it's reasonable or not, but, it's going to be a significant impact on my property and people there. And
You're one lot to the west of the applicant's property?
yes, I am. I'm,
East.
sorry,
East,
east.
sorry, yeah.
Sorry. Thanks, guys. And just in considering it, I haven't really seen it, I don't know if there are elevations of the buildings that are going in, but we're just realizing that, we're gonna see a lot from our house, maybe not so much in the summer, because there are some trees, although they're not substantial, but significantly in the wintertime. And also, with 6 units there, maybe there's 2 cars per unit, there's 12 cars going back and forth. And we're just wondering about, my wife and I are about screening possibly along our property there. And I don't know if that's a reasonable thing, if there could be arborvitaes or something that's gonna not drop leaves in the wintertime, or even a fence. So I guess that was my question in terms of elevation for the buildings. I know they're supposed to be 1 story to the uphill side, but what do the roof lines look like, dormers, such like that?
Okay, well, if that's a question, why don't we allow Andy to answer that with respect to the sight lines of the buildings, if you have that information?
We don't have elevations prepared yet. I think, as we may have talked about at the last hearing, the driveway is on the uphill side, so most likely you would see 1-story elevation on the uphill sides of the units, with most likely 2 stories plus the rooftop on the back. given the location of the driveway here in relation to the existing mobile home and in the existing drive, the vegetation through much of this area, at least to the back of the mobile home roughly, would remain intact. There would likely be some clearing associated with the grading on the uphill side to the property line. And that's where the vegetation kind of increases on the back of Mr. Swanborn's property. But we can certainly look at the grading's impact upon the existing vegetation and provide some information relative to elevations for preliminary review.
The other question I had was just about...
Sorry, Mike?
Sorry. The other question I had was just about clearing at the back of the property there. I know the driveway touches whatever the setback is, 5 feet from my corner, but as you go around the corner, I mean, it's wooded, but I mean, it's, marginal trees. I mean, what are they, 5 or 6 inches or less? I was just wondering if there's going to be clearing through there and, lawn or whatever, if that's getting put in there.
So again, we'll have that information with preliminary. We'd expect that there would be some clearing on the uphill side of the drive, but certainly not back to the property line. So some of this vegetation, in this area will remain intact. Some of it, due to grading for the driveway, will be removed. But again, we'll have information on where the limits of that clearing will be in the grading, in whether any screening might be warranted with the preliminary plans.
So if you,
Okay.
the point is that we're right at this point just at sketch review.
Yep.
So they'll be submitting, if they are permitted to move forward, a plan that would have more information that you'd be able to see and better discern, and perhaps that'll answer your concerns. But I'd encourage you to speak with the applicant and their engineer if you have more questions. It's certainly permissible.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Does anyone else have any questions of the applicant from the audience? Please approach and give your name, please.
It's Peg Rose now, Natural Resources Committee.
Okay. Are you going to be giving testimony or just asking questions this
I have
evening?
some comments.
Okay, then you should raise your right hand and do solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth in connection with any evidence that you should give this evening for this application?
I will.
Thank you. Can you state your name again, please?
It's Peg Rosenau, Rosenau.
Okay, and your comments, Ms. Rosenau?
My comments were I did go on the site walk last week. Thank you for arranging that. And my particular concerns were the last building, the northernmost building there. On the map, it does say intermittent stream, but when you get there, it's a pretty substantial stream, I would say. It was, you could hear it as you were coming. And right at the edge of that, where building 3 is very steep. So it was not hard to imagine with all the impervious surface from the building and the driveway that there could be issues with sedimentation and erosion straight into the La Platte River there. So that stood out to me quite a bit. Another problem with that is it's directly across from a public walkway with a overlook on the other side, and it was very easy to see that from the side we were on where the building sites were. And that would, you could imagine that would be very clear to people on the other side, and viewscapes are one of our interests. Same goes for the second building as well. There's very sparse tree cover there. There probably aren't many trees with more than, an 8-inch, 10-inch diameter. It's very thin, rocky outcrops there, so not much is able to grow there. A lot of it's just scrubby stuff, so there's not really much screening there. So I think that would be a big impact, scenic impact. You can also see from the road. I mean, it's hard to, if you're driving up Falls Road, you're looking down in a natural area, the Falls historic area, and you're suddenly going to see some houses, I think, pretty clearly along that raised cliff area. So those were some things that stuck out to me. And if it would be, I don't know if they're going to be there or not. I mean, I have concerns about that last building and the second one. But if they are there, somehow they should probably be pulled back away from that ridge line. if that's possible. So those are my comments.
Thank you. A question for you, Caitlin. I don't, as I sit here, know if there is a provision in the subdivision or zoning rules that allow us to consider the impact of construction on a public view shed.
I think maybe some homework for natural resources is quantifying that impact in some way to kind of determine what exactly it is, and they'll be coming to you to get comments and, you know, going through there and pulling out the sections that you feel are relevant and are hitting on your concerns. There's some general language about views and natural resources and historic resources and things like that. So if there's a substantial impact as a result of this, I suppose it should be taken into consideration. But at Sketch, I don't know that there's anything solid to consider
Yeah, I
to
think,
give recommendations on.
I think until we see the grading plan and how it's fitting into the site, it's hard to, from sketch plan, to really
Right.
tell.
Gail?
Just a question. When you say
Can you
quantify.
state your name so
Gail
we can-
Albert,
Thank you.
also Natural Resources Committee. When you say quantify, how do you quantify the impact on a,
So any public
And a viewscape.
investment or long-term planning that went into that overlook area and things along those lines, I would say, if, you know, public funds went to it and, you know, any proposed long-term plans that this would be interrupting. It is private property and it's not conserved, but with that in mind, we can certainly, you know, take that into consideration, or the DRB can take it into consideration and.
okay, thank
yeah,
you.
just-
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else in the audience who has questions? Sure, Mr. Swanborn?
Yeah, Mr. Swanborn, I did also notice when I was looking at the drawing that the stream was termed intermittent, and I've been there for 23 years, and it has never been intermittent. It's always runs, and in the wintertime, it runs fully. I have no idea what that means necessarily, but it isn't, wouldn't term an intermittent stream.
Andy, do you want to respond to that?
I don't have nearly the experience that Mr. Swanborn does. I was out there a couple times in September, and September was a very dry month. But when I was there, I walked right down the ledge to the river and didn't get my feet wet. But that was
How would
only
that make a difference if it's intermittent or not?
intermittent flow. There's not a constant flow, a base flow associated with it.
Well, let's assume that it's a constant flow. Does that make any difference to you in terms of what the applicant might need to do?
Not as far as town regulations, I don't believe, because there wouldn't be any buffer associated with it either way.
No, it's not mapped. It's not mapped in our floodplain and water course.
Okay, thank you.
What, so if it's, let's assume it's free-flowing, so that would say a developer could, and it's not on an official government map. Does that mean a developer can build right up to it and over it and not acknowledge it, and just pipe it under the house?
No, it just, you know, this might be something more, we need to consider stormwater a little bit more than perhaps we would have if it was a absolutely intermittent stream and siting of the house. I don't see that it's built on top of it at all, so it just calls for a little more consideration in the planning aspect of it, but
As I understand it, the stream is in the lot that's been dedicated for open space.
Right, those, could you laser it? There we go,
So it's running here.
yep, okay.
So I have a question. Andy, do you anticipate the grading for that last duplex to extend into the fourth lot? Or do you think it'll mainly be,
No, I
On
think
the
the
duplex
extent
side.
of the grading would be limited to that lot.
Okay.
And not over the property line and certainly not into the stream.
And when if it's approved and you move forward, you'll be coming back with grading and drainage, and
Correct.
we'll be able to look at it closer.
I have a question for you, Caitlin. On the motion that you prepared for us, I'm a little confused. If we
Oh,
were to go
I
there, it's a motion to finalize the record, close the hearing, and authorize preparation of a preliminary plan application.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says that we would move the applicant to be authorized to prepare a final plan.
Oh, where did I put that? Oh, sorry, that was just a typo.
I just wanted to make sure.
One last thing I just wanted to point out, just for consideration, not necessarily, well, perhaps moving forward, is it was brought to my attention that there's some significant natural areas mapped by A&R out here. And I was out with the botanist for A&R and sent him this information, so he has a heads up on it. And
Okay.
he indicated to me that some of the rare and endangered plants are more in the rocky outcroppings along the La Platte, so it's just something to consider moving forward. It was one of the comments that I had in there, that it could either be a private consultant or you contact A&R and see if they need to go out there, but just that there do seem to be some natural resources of.
Can you just tell us what the different hatches mean?
Yep, so that red hatch that follows the La Platte is threatened or endangered species, and the rare is not on there. Blue is uncommon species and other features for animals. The yellow is the same thing for plant. That purple outline is a significant natural community. And then that big yellow swath it's like a rated 5 habitat block.
So how should we consider this information this evening in connection with sketch?
I guess I put in here as a recommendation that they talk to A&R and whether or not you agree with that, or if you'd like to add anything else to that.
I think speaking with A&R and also getting the project review sheet is important. So unless anyone else has anything to add, then I would move to classify this subdivision, SUB 1702, as a major subdivision because it's 4 or more lots. I have a second to that motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Motion carries. Are you abstaining?
Yep.
Okay. And then I would next move to finalize the record, close the hearing, and authorize the applicant to prepare a preliminary plan application for SUB 1702. And we're going to offer the following recommendations. That the applicant obtain comments from the appropriate departments as required under section 600, subparagraph 28. Obtain and submit a project review sheet. Obtain comments from A&R Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I think that would pretty much do it in keeping with the map that we were just discussing. So with
Do you
that.
want to put in the shifting of the closest?
Oh, thank you very
Yeah.
much. I appreciate that. Sorry. And that the applicant shift the footprint for the southerlymost building as far north as feasible. Does that capture the thoughts of the board? So I'll take a second to that motion if anyone wishes to make it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. So now you can go forth and give us a preliminary plan. Thank you, Andy, for coming. Okay. A little longer. The next matter on our agenda is application SUB 1701. It's an application by Gail and Claude Lapierre for a final plan review of a 2-lot subdivision. The property is located at 6140 Route 116 in the rural district and a portion of the floodplain and watercourse overlay districts. Is there anyone here in connection with that? Well, let me let the group clear out and then we'll go forward. Good evening.
Good evening.
Excellent. Let me guess, Mr. and Mrs. LaPierre. Okay, are you both going to give testimony this evening?
Possibly.
Okay, have you both raise your right hand? You swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with any evidence you should give on behalf of your application? Okay, thank you. So I'll just ask you to step up to the mic and talk to us about what you're doing.
Well, this is unlike 99.9% of the subdivisions you see. There's no new construction happening here. It's phase one of turning the farm over to the next generation. We are taking the house, the shop, and turning it over to our son and daughter-in-law, and we're retaining the rest of the open agricultural fields and continuing to farm.
Okay. Does anyone on the board have questions of the applicant? My colleague is looking at a map. He might have some questions. I want to give him a minute.
Keep going, you're good.
Okay, I have a couple of questions myself. It's been brought to my attention through staff that you have private water, is that right? So well-
Correct. And wastewater.
Okay. Do you have log information? Is that what we should be concerned about? Getting well-logged data? No? Okay. So you're not planning on changing any of the undeveloped portion of the land that you farm?
At this point, no.
Okay.
So we have to make sure, though, that we don't put that limitation on this, correct?
Correct.
It's identified here, I know, yeah, exactly.
Never
It's
say
not
never.
inherently there as part of the application,
Yeah.
it's just
Well,
a
it's
subdivision,
Just to
so
subdivide.
there's
Yeah,
no
but there's
concert.
wording that says no further development is anticipated or planned or something like that. Just from our perspective, we want to make sure we don't encumber that,
Right.
okay?
Does anyone have a concern about that?
I don't. I
Okay.
think it's just for the short term,
Right.
or a term, be it short
Yeah,
or
I think
long,
it-
it's up to the
I think
applicant.
it's
How long do we
premature.
live?
It's really premature at this point.
Right.
So would anyone like to make a motion in connection with this application?
I would move to finalize the record for SUB 17-01. And I would also, at the same time, make a motion to close with an indication of approval for, close the hearing and indicate approval for SUB 17-01, with one condition that a Mylar be recorded in the Shelburne land records within 180 days of the approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you
Can
very
I
much.
just add something? Something never happened several years ago. Mr. LaPierre served on our board, either on the DRB for about over 20 years. And we were in a rather interesting time. We were going through new administrator, town manager, et cetera. And I would just like to recognize, and I think it should be on the record, that Mr. LaPierre served this town in that capacity for probably longer than anybody in the whole town on any committee. So,
I think Hilda White beat me.
yeah, I think you're definitely second. So I just want to thank you personally and thank you on behalf of the
Well,
town.
thank you very much, greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Good night. That's nice. Okay, the next matter on our agenda this evening is application CU 17-13. It's an application by our friend Dave Marshall, Civil Engineering Associates, on behalf of Charles and Marna Davis for a conditional use review of a lakeshore erosion control structure. The property is located at 4135 Harbor Road in the Rural District, Lakeshore Overlay District, and Floodplain and Watercourse Overlay District. Before we get started on this application, I feel it's appropriate for me to disclose that I am a neighbor of Mr. and Mrs. Davis and belong to the same neighborhood association that they belong to, but I don't have any financial interest or other interest in the outcome of this proceeding. So I feel I'm not conflicted under our ethical rules from serving on this application, but if anyone feels otherwise, with my having disclosed that I belong to the same neighborhood association as the Davises, please let me know. Given the silence, I assume there's no problem, so we can move forward with the application.
We should also make sure, I think the last name's misspelled on the.
Yeah, it's Davis.
Davis.
That's the only one typo, it's Davis.
Okay.
IS, yes. As in Dudley. So, good evening, Mr. Marshall. You want to tell us about what the Davises are up to? It looks like they have 4 different
Very good.
call-outs there.
I'm Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates, and
And,
this application
Before we
seeks...
get started, Mr. Marshall, there we go. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth in connection with these proceedings this evening?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Very good, I'll try again. Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates. The Davis are proposing to construct erosion control improvements, a seawall, along the west shoreline of Lake Champlain. This particular property is located off of Harbor Road on Shelburne Point. And in this particular case, the shoreline has experienced significant erosion. We had Kate come out and take a look at many of the areas. Portions of this area of the property currently has soil erosion that's undermining the trees. This particular area, due to the wave fetches, has actually started to erode the soft stone to the point where we're having a convex situation and erosion at that particular location. And then as you move further south on the property, we transition out of the steep bluff area back into the shorter areas where, again, we have more soil erosion that we're looking to try to protect the existing tree mass that basically occupies all of this particular property. The nice thing about this project is that we don't have to remove any trees to basically support this, although the application does talk about one poor woebegone 4-inch tree that currently is overhanging right about this location. It's reaching right out into the lake, and eventually it'll dip down. But as far as full disclosure, there is that one tree that we think will be better off removing that before its roots actually start to create further erosion as it moves in the downhill direction. If we can go to 2.1.
The pretty slide.
So in this particular case, what we've done with the wall is actually try to break up the mass with terracing wherever we had a large amount of elevation change from the tie-in point ultimately to the connection point at the high end. This particular diagram perhaps doesn't show how high some of the lower wall might be. If you could imagine another couple of stone depths down, you would be looking at initially the first face of the pier, the wall, and then landscaping, vegetation, and then a second tier to basically tie back into the existing grade at the top. The intent here is to utilize stone material that's generally gray in color, so it doesn't pop out at you when you're out on the lake looking back at the property. The existing rock is a host of both gray and tan colors, dark tan colors on the property. So we've tried to find something that is not, again, a color that basically, again, just tries to draw people's attention to the site, but actually allows it to kind of to blend back in with the existing colors that are located along this particular portion of the shore. The application does propose one stairway to come down from the house. We call this the cove area. It basically, the applicant meets the minimum number of requirements as far as stairways along the 950 feet of shoreline. So there's, from what I understand from staff, there's no issue there. We do have 4 plans that were shown on the initial cover sheet. Might want to go back to the beginning. So these are the 4 sheets that are a part of the application package that show the different sections. These, both the far south and far north ends basically are just a single tier wall. We're basically able to locate those far enough away from the lake and at a high enough elevation that only one single tier, or well, we'll call it tier, of rock is requested as part of the application. However, when we get into some of the steep bluff areas where we're looking to basically protect the existing soft rock with a newly proposed hard rock to basically absorb the energy from the lake, here we're employing that idea of multiple tiers of rock to basically, again, break up the mass, but again, achieve the goal as far as erosion protection along that portion of the shoreline. I think in the staff report, it talked about one particular idiosyncrasy in the zoning bylaw in which there's been previous discussion before the board, I understand, as well as the applicant was asked to respond to issues associated with portions of the wall that are located between elevation 102 and the inland area. And one way to read the rules is that you can't build anything between elevation 102 and 100 feet inland of this particular 102 contour line, which I think is generally the intent for structures, so no new buildings and things of that nature. In this particular case, one of the unfortunate components is that seawalls got caught into the language, where in this particular case, one of the challenges of building a wall that's high enough to basically absorb the energy from the lake, whether it be during high water times or high wave conditions, you ultimately need to take that top of wall that we're carrying generally at elevation 106 and tie it back into the landform. And the only way you can take the top of a 106 wall and tie it back into the landform at elevation 106 is to extend beyond the 102 contour back into the land. So inherently, we understand that this has been presented to the Development Review Board previously, and everybody came to the same conclusion that it was just an unfortunate oversight in the drafting of the rules that the Planning Commission has not had a chance to fix yet, so we get a chance to talk every time we have a seawall and a project that we're trying to tie in at the very ends to go through that particular issue. Kate, is there anything else that you would like us to highlight as part of the presentation?
No, but I'm going to keep pointing out the language because it's there.
Yeah. It's probably not really appropriate, but we had an application from a landowner in the Land's End development.
Brandon.
Was that their last name, Brandon? At Joyce, I think, Brandon? But,
I'm not sure.
Anyway, they're doing something similar, and it's right to the north of that. There's a small beach, and then they're doing something similar. Do you know whether there's been any talk back and forth so that the walls wouldn't look disparate?
No, we have not had any conversations.
I don't remember who the engineer was for that.
VCA.
Oh.
Jack. It was Jack.
It might be worth doing just for general appearances, because what's happening, I think, out there is, yeah, I can see the erosion, and so there's also development as well. So with it comes the need for the stabilizing wall. But if there was no development, of course, there wouldn't be. So we really are changing whether, the appearance of the land from the lake. And I know that part of the town plan and part of what we're supposed to consider is just that. So to have it be done in a coordinated way may make some sense for that purpose. I don't know, I mean, it's a totally separate application, I realize that, so maybe not really appropriate since there's nothing in our regulations that tell us that, but it might be
Right.
worthwhile just for the sake of organized development, just a comment.
Yep,
I don't
that's
think
fair.
we can really put it as a condition on the application, but, Jeff, anything?
I had a question, I can't remember what it was.
Should I pass you and then
Yeah.
come back?
Yeah.
Mark? Jeff?
Good.
Ian?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remembered. Could you, I mean, I think it's nice that it's being terraced to break up the scale, but I was wondering if you could just mention the kind of maximum height of a single wall that you're proposing.
So, within the application, Kate, maybe if you can go to sheet 2.0.
It's probably on the
Oh, am I
elevation.
going the wrong
over
way?
there.
It's on the elevations, it's
Small
also
on the-
graphically, unfortunately, no, you
Oh,
won't be
yeah.
able to see it very
Yeah,
well.
no, it's too.
What we tried to provide in the application was elevations of the wall, which basically showed the bottom portion and the top portion. There are areas that, the worst-case scenario, to explain to you, would be the lowest point of the wall would be at elevation 95.5, and would be extending up perhaps to the 104 or 105 range. So there could be sections 9 or 10 feet tall. But that's in the location where the existing bluffs are 15 or 18 feet tall. So we again tried to, not create an overwhelming feature, but tried to basically use scale based on the existing conditions as the wall basically goes up and down.
Any questions from anybody in the audience on this application? Hey, Gail.
Thank you. I just, by way of disclosure, just say that the Natural Resources Committee has not had an opportunity to either visit the site or to see this. But one of the things that I know from previous discussions we've had of seawalls is a concern that we be sure that any seawall that's built doesn't have negative effects on adjoining properties. And it would just be nice to have that certified in some way.
Can I just ask Gail what kind of negative effects you're worried about?
What we've talked about in the past is if a seawall does alter the way that the tide, I don't know what it's called, the tide comes in, or the energy of the water as you've referred to it, and it bounces it back in a way that it's not accustomed to being bounced back, just to be sure that it doesn't bounce back and then reverberate to an adjoining property.
Do you have any concerns about that, Dave, in this case, given where the property is located in relation to other properties?
Can we go back to the first one? So this is the overall plan. The one on the north end, currently there is a seawall that we're tying into at that far north end. So the one nice thing about this particular design is that most of the wall is set back in a way that under normal water conditions, we're not going to even have the water touching the wall. And probably the one change, one difference is this particular area where we do
Right.
start at the 95.5, and obviously when those periods of time in the springtime, the waves will lap up against that particular portion of the seawall. Here, I don't expect any of that energy dissipation or distribution of energy to be an issue for the abutters on either side. Here, the property line actually extends quite a ways away from this one particular wall that we're proposing. So I'm quite comfortable there that with this particular, again, everything is associated with proximity and direction of the wind and as far as where the waves are going and how that particular energy would be absorbed or dissipated or deflected. In this particular case, based on the distance from this most southerly wall and the southerly property line, again, plenty of distance there as far as mitigation.
And to be clear, the call-outs at the top of the screen, there's very little elevation there between the lake and the land itself. It's almost beach-like, am I right? So that you're
This
not-
particular area has more the stony beach
Yeah.
characteristics, and there is a pretty significant setback from this particular water elevation that happened to be picked up by the surveyors at the time, and the actual wall location. Here, what we're trying to do is basically protect the soil and the tree root masses from further erosion. Right now, during those high water, high energy, high wave periods, it does run up across the beach and hit the bottom of that particular area. So we're trying to basically preserve that and minimize the amount of erosion going back into the lake. And it's really, this area where the bluff is that we really are fairly close to that edge of the lake in relationship to the low end of the wall.
Does that answer your question, Gail? Yes. Okay. Anything else? Okay, at this point then, I would, the motion I would make is to finalize the record for application CU 17-13, and I would, as a corollary, move to close the hearing with an indication of approval and direct staff to prepare a decision to indicate approval of the conditional use application, CU 17-13, for an erosion control structure at 4135 Harbor Road as depicted within the application materials, and with the condition that a zoning permit be required prior to any improvements being made. Any removal of vegetation would require a lakeshore vegetation cutting application. And within 90 days of project completion, a professional engineer shall certify that the project has been constructed in accordance with the approval or the approved plans. I think that's, I don't think we have any placeholders.
There's a staff comment about
Oh,
a
yeah.
project review sheet.
Oh,
you
sorry,
looking for
no,
that
I
also?
have it. What's that?
Do you want that also in here?
No, I have it. That, I forgot to take that off.
Okay,
I
very good.
started this a long time ago.
So I don't think there's any other need for any other conditions, so I'll make the motion as it stands. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Moving right along, we're at item 7 on our agenda. It's the application, nope, I'm sorry, we're on item 8. It's the application of Alan Kirkpatrick for sketch plan review. It's application number SUB 17-03. The property is located at 6747 Spear Street in the residential district and stormwater overlay district. Good evening. Hi. Hi, nice to see you, Alan. It's been a while. Yeah, do you swear or affirm that any testimony you should give in connection with these proceedings shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, why don't you tell us what you're up to?
Okay, I'm Alan Kirkpatrick. I have a house up on Irish Hill on Spear Street that's 5 3/4 acres. And I'm interested in splitting a 1.7 acre lot from that to have 2 lots.
Is it your intention to eventually build a home on that lot, second lot?
That's my intention, is to downsize.
Okay. So you would sell the house you live in, build a smaller house, and,
Exactly.
okay. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Anything to add, Kate?
The only comment I really had for this is that the wastewater situation is a little interesting. It's proposing to connect to a private line that does feed into public wastewater, but he needs permission from the owner of that line, and we also need to know that that line has the capacity to be hooked onto again, which I think you're well aware of, because you've done a lot of work with Lisa and Chris. So that's my only concern, and that should really be ironed out before anything,
Before taking any further steps?
yeah.
But that doesn't require us to hold on this at all, right?
Not at sketch.
I did have a question for you, Alan. In looking at, I had a hard time with the map. So your lot is,
It's the one in the middle there.
okay, 6747,
That's
and
right.
you access it right now over the lot to the north, am I right?
No, the access is right in front of my house.
Okay,
And so there's a branch going to the south
oh, I see, yeah.
that
I
goes
got
to
it.
my neighbor's house, Lochran's.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm proposing to put a branch to the north to the new lot. So we'd still keep one curb cut there.
So you wouldn't be adding any curb cuts?
That's correct.
Okay, that was my major concern.
And there's a similar setup right across the street with 3 lots.
Anyone have anything to add from the board? How about anyone in the audience? Or
Where on Spear Street
Alan, you can probably best describe it. It's a little bit north of Irish Hill, right? That'll work.
That's right. So if you are going north from Irish Hill, there's a cottage on your right there on the corner, and I'm the next driveway up, which is about a third of a mile up on the right side.
I probably should have disclosed that I've known Mr. Kirkpatrick for about 25 years or so, but I haven't seen him in 10.
Probably.
I think you're good.
Okay. Just to be clear. All right, thank you. Has anyone, nobody else in the audience have anything to add or any concerns or questions?
I've been working with the neighbors also, and so the neighbors on that side are in
Your
favor.
side.
On the side that I'm proposing to put this lot, split the lot, are in favor of this. And I think they would be here tonight, except that Dennis broke his neck in a bicycle accident about 5 weeks ago. He's recovering nicely, but
This wasn't not high on his list of
No.
places to be right now? Wow, okay, well.
So.
Do you have any questions?
I don't, no, I was gonna make a motion to classify it.
All right,
So I'd move to classify subdivision SUB, application SUB 17-03 as a major subdivision. At the same time, I would move to finalize the record, close the hearing, and authorize preparation of a preliminary plan application. With two conditions: one, that you obtain comments from the appropriate departments required in section 600, item 28. And secondly, you get the written permission to connect the private wastewater line as proposed on your site plan.
Okay. There's an association for the sewer line.
Okay.
I'm part of it right now,
Water
actually.
fund
So,
accessing that.
Kate, why is this a major, not a
because
minor?
it's 4,
It's
right?
Is part of a previous
Part of a previous-
subdivision.
Okay,
subdivision.
okay.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you.
thank you.
Hey, it's 8 o'clock and we are making a ton of progress. I'm sure we'll be out by 8:15. We have 2 more applications left. The next one is application SUB 17-04. It's an application by Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of Mr. Mike Farrington. It's for sketch plan review of a proposed 4-lot subdivision. The property is located at 4788 Spear Street in the residential district, stormwater overlay district, and a portion of the floodplain and watercourse overlay districts. Is there anyone in the audience this evening to give testimony in connection with this application? Approach, sir. Okay, all right, so we'll go one by one. You must be Mr. Farrington.
Dave Farrington. I don't know who Mike is on that
I
application.
don't know who he is either.
That's all
But we're
right.
not going forward until we hear from, no kidding. Can you raise your right hand,
Yes.
Mr. Farrington? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And Dave Marshall, too, okay. Did you get that, Mary Ann? Thank you.
Before CEA has their say about the project, I have a few comments about the history of that parcel, because I think that it may play into the discussions later. It's a 23-acre parcel, and we purchased and built our house there in 1979, 38 years ago. Then 33 years ago, in 1984, I came to the town and got a building permit to construct a storage barn approximately 1,000 feet off from Spear Street down into the woods. 32 years ago, in 1985, I approached the town and I got a building permit to construct an office addition onto that barn for the construction company. 1988, 3 years after building that, I had a letter from the town saying, what is this that you're doing running a business down in the agricultural zone? And I said, well, I have the permits. I went to the town. I have the building. Well, they didn't have the record of the office addition. I gave them the permit number. She said, I'll have to look into it. She called me back and she says, we disagree with the decision they made at the time, but you are correct. You have the permits to run your business. So from that point on, my tax bill had the she agreed with me. From that time on, my tax bill was split. I had the homestead education tax and a higher non-residential commercial tax for the business. So now that brings us to the present zoning. The old rules for zoning was a 400-foot frontage and a 5-acre minimum. The present zoning regulations dated May 2016 have changed considerably to 20,000 square feet or approximately a half acre and 100-foot frontage. It also states that non-conforming uses, structures, and lots are allowed and may be continued, but are limited to no increase. So we think our application for the subdivision is in compliance with present zoning regulations. We've been assisted in the process by Civil Engineering Associates. And the basis of this process is for me to kind of put my affairs in order. As the clock is winding down, as they say, I'm trying to make these parcels be more identifiable for my heirs to deal with and sell off or build on themselves. So we look forward to your comments and your approval.
Very good. Thank you. Dave Marshall from
you.
Civil Engineering Associates. What we'll do is just outline what Mr. Farrington had introduced in regards to the 23-acre parcel. This particular project proposes a 4-lot subdivision in which the existing house will sit on one. There will be a lot created around the commercial use, so it will no longer be on the same parcel as the residential component today. There is one proposed single-family lot down in the southeast corner of the property, and then the remaining lot 4 for future development purposes, but no specific identification for use at this point in time. Currently, the rear commercial area is serviced by a driveway and will continue to do so via an access easement across the open space lot. Being careful that open space is a reservation for future development. There is a discussion point in the staff report as far as how the new single-family lot might be accessing Spear Street. That will be still an open discussion, whether it be a single curb cut, which is preferred, or whether there be some other way of basically sharing curb cuts. Unfortunately, the existing house's driveway is on the far northern end of that particular lot. Trying to share them makes it a little bit more challenging, a little bit more thinking that has to be done to do there. But again, the preferred route, if there's adequate site distances, that we would have a single curb cut for that new lot. That being the background, the components of the residential district calls for all of the lots to be tied into municipal sewer. I think that is a very good general statement, but there are some areas of town that are still quite far away from the existing sewer infrastructure. This particular neighborhood to the south is served, and in this particular case, this particular property benefits from a deep gravel deposit, so we actually have very good soils for on-site wastewater disposal. The sewer ordinance talks about the fact that you have to tie into municipal sewer if there is a sewer line in the roadway, or if there is one proposed in the roadway. And there's neither of those at this point in time on Spear Street, or at least that portion of Spear Street. So that being the background, we're very comfortable with, again, the on-site wastewater disposal capabilities of the property. The water line does run up and down Spear Street, and we will be proposing to connect into the municipal water line, provided when water is available, or allocations are available, I should say, to basically service the new single-family lot. That being the background, there is this stream that basically runs along the off-property that basically divides this Mr. Farrington's property from the neighborhood to the south. This particular project kind of represents an infill between the Westview neighborhood to the north and the existing homes on the south side. I guess we'll start there with any questions that the board may have.
Work my way down. Jeff?
None right now, but I'm gonna.
Mark? Jeff? And Ian, anything? The applicant at this time? I know there are other people in the audience who raised their hands in
Oh, I
connection.
did have one for Kate, 430.2. Looks like the staff comment was cut off.
Yeah, cut off.
So, this is a good opening anyway. So for a single-family house, they're meeting, and two-family houses, they're meeting the required setbacks for a lot one. What I don't know how to address, and this is an ongoing comment throughout, is the business that is there. It does not seem clear to me whether it should be considered an illegal or non-conforming use, which, if it's a non-conforming use, that's certainly one thing and one discussion track, but if it's an illegal use, I don't know how that discussion goes exactly, because how do you treat it comes into question. So to answer it, the setbacks are met for the single-family house on the application, but for the other facility, I don't know what the setbacks would be. It's not, it meets the definition of a construction services facility, which is not a permitted or a conditional use in the district.
What's the definition of that?
A facility serving as the headquarters or central facility for a construction firm, which may include the parking of vehicles and/or the storage of equipment or materials.
But Mr. Farrington told us he got a permit, but was it
For an,
to? Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. For an, so the permit reads, an addition to be used as an office. And maybe it just needs a little bit more information of exactly the activities that have been going on there and will be going on there moving forward, and whether or not it falls in that definition, which it seems to me it does, or if it falls in the definition of an office, which is a conditional use in the district. So maybe you can provide some clarification.
Yes, I don't know where you're going. There is an office addition, and there's, at times, 4 employees that are there. The balance of the facility, the storage barn is for equipment that you're not using on a certain job, and the parking of vehicles that aren't being used. You have a dump truck that's not always in use, and it's down within that area. I think we've been very quiet. We're 1,000 feet off the road. I don't think we've ever had any complaints about what's going on there. We never pressed for signage or anything on Spear Street, and half the people don't even know where we are. We just say, by the big water tank, come down that road if you want to find us. Obviously, if you consider this situation and the permitting process a long time ago, you'll notice that the date of my application and the issuing of the permit are the same day. You come in, you say, can we do this? They say, yeah, you want it? You fill it out, and you walk out with a permit. So we did ask and wanted it clear, and they issued the permits for both. And we've been there 30-something years, so we intend to stay at least 30 more, and longer, we hope. We have different young people, grandsons and sons and everything that love the business, and they're in it, and we hope to be there a long time.
Thank you, sir. My understanding is if you have a pre-existing non-conforming use, it's okay unless you want to extend it or expand it or somehow change it.
Right, that's how it reads. You can't expand it.
And so I don't understand what illegal use is versus non-conforming, especially since no one seems to be contesting, at least at this point. We haven't heard from everybody that a permit was issued for this barn to be used for the purpose it's being used.
So, reviewing it in planning and zoning, it doesn't seem clear that it was permitted exactly for that use, and so it seems like a question to me whether or not it's a pre-existing nonconformity or an illegal use. So the difference being an illegal use, after 15 years, we can't do any zoning enforcement for something that's already been there, even if it wasn't allowed. So that would be an illegal use. It never got the permitting to function as what it's functioning as. Now I realize there's a significant amount of time that has passed here, and the bylaws have changed, and there's some things to take into consideration. And then non-conforming use is something that received permitting, and then as a result of changes to the bylaws, to the plans, becomes non-conforming as a result of that, but was conforming at the time. And so they're treated, non-conformities have a specific section in our bylaws. An illegal use, I don't know how you would treat that. But my basic point was, I would like to get a legal opinion on what this would be considered. I'm not convinced it's a non-conforming use. Whether or not you guys agree with that, or would like to go ahead with the non-conformity, but then that opens up to, okay, so it's a commercial use, it needs to go through site plan review, it needs to go through a conditional use review, as offices, though it isn't actually meeting the definition of an office, it's meeting the definition of construction service facilities.
I think the office combination storage barn.
Mr. Farrington, yeah.
The office combination storage barn is the facility, is not limited to office use only. And in the discussions of the application, that's what we discuss. Again, the process is a little different now, where you can cross every T and dot every I, but we were very clear as to what we wanted to do, and they permitted it.
Does anyone else from the board have any questions of the applicant? I know there are people in the audience who wish to speak. If you do wish to speak, now is the time. Come forward to the microphone, Persis. Good evening. Could you state your name for the record?
Hi, I'm Persis Worrell. I am the immediate neighbor to the south.
And do you swear or affirm that any
Yes.
testimony you should give this evening will be true and accurate to the best of your ability?
I do.
Thank you.
And I think I'm actually the longest amount of bordering neighbor to the southwest, the big chunk of green in there, in the ravine. The presentation answered a couple of my questions. I presume that the addition of the pictures of the barn and stuff was just to go to the issue of the permit to build those barns, not that you're intending to construct any other buildings on that back. Okay. And the business is not going to expand or change in any way? There's no...
Nice, comfortable family size, and it's gonna stay right there.
Okay. And the new lot, other than your residential lot, is going to be residential?
Yes.
Okay, so, and the remaining could go either way, commercial or?
It would all be residential.
Okay, the fourth.
My personal
Yeah, we should
opinion
give them
is, as you see the lot, that where the warehouse is, at 1,000 feet, would be the extent of anything that would be building it. Everything below that, I think it's costly prohibitive to even think that you would extend roads and services down there. So you're gonna end up with still a nice chunk of land like we have. There's nice walking paths, and we walk up your place, and it's a great rural atmosphere, and it will most likely stay there as long as we control the property. So I'm saying that at the 1,000-foot mark of the warehouse to the east would be any future development, and the rest of that would remain as pretty as it is right now.
Thank you. And I understand better now as well about the sewer situation, but I would be interested in knowing what is the existing on-site for the current residential and what would happen in the new residential at some point. You don't have at this point. And then the other, there was a notice on there about potential future community water treatment sites mentioned on the map, and that was a little bit alarming. It sounds rather industrial, so I don't know what that, if you could help me on that, would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Where is that now?
There were two spots there, right behind the two residential lots.
Oh,
Those
no,
two.
that's on-site sewage for the gravel area,
For the
Septic.
2 residential?
Yes.
Okay, it said community
or any future,
water treatment
any future.
Should have said wastewater
It
treatment.
does say wastewater
for the
treatment.
each residential, not, okay, thank you.
I did bring
Appreciate
one of the map that will probably show up, but this area right here.
Wait a minute, Mr. Farrington, yeah, Mike, sorry.
Gotta have the mic on?
Yeah, it's public meeting law, gotta get it all on the record.
Okay, this area that I've got dotted in from some geographical maps,
Can
that
you
is all
talk,
gravel.
can you identify the area you're talking about a little more specifically for our,
Here's Spear,
uh-huh,
here's my existing house,
yep,
my leach field's right there.
okay.
These leach fields would take gravity feed from anything that happened there.
In your new proposed
And
lot.
the new all of that is like the most beautiful vein of gravel that Shelburne never saw in their life. But, as you recall, this Miller development, they pumped the whole street back up to this lot, which is also 100% gravel. So there is such a beautiful vein of gravel, runs right through here and over to the brook. And this shows on other maps, but I just have it dotted in to this one. And we've done test holes, and CEA has analyzed them, and they can't believe that you can dig 6 feet deep and still have gravel.
Are you incredulous, Mr. Marshall?
I'm very impressed with what Mother Nature left them.
Okay, well, so staff has asked us to continue the proceeding for further investigation as to the use, and I don't, oh, there's more people in the audience, I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask just a few questions.
Sure, if you would just identify yourself?
My name's Michael Ashew. I also live to the north, east of Percy and on the end of Ravine Court, which is the court there.
Okay, and do you swear or affirm that any evidence you should give this evening will be true and accurate to the best of your ability?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
So my first question is, what's the plan for the Vast Trail, which runs along that property? If there are any thoughts about keeping that open or making that remain available. I also, it's great to hear that I love, obviously I love my property, but I love the Farrington property and Percy's property as well. We walk along the edge there quite a bit, and they've been great neighbors, all of them, and I've enjoyed living there. My dream is that one day this will be a nice, big, conserved spot of precious natural resource in Shelburne. It's a really beautiful ravine. I think it's unlike anything we have in other places in the town. And so it's great to hear. I can't quite make out what's happening with the other two, which look like they would butt up against the back end of my property. Those are the other two then, is that correct?
I'm not sure I'm following.
Can I use your? I love using these. This and this are the other two?
No.
No, that's all one.
Okay, so these, I'm trying to figure out where, so this is the one residential, this is the current here. The other, and the idea is to expand this and to create a zoned lot, is that correct? And then there's one more that I'm wondering. I heard 4.
Yeah, maybe,
It's all the leftover
Yeah.
that goes around the.
I see.
do you get it? Or Mr. Marshall could
Here?
re-explain it.
Sorry.
I can do that, sure. So, Mr. Farrington's existing home here
Yep.
will be on its own lot, so we'll call that Lot 1. We'll have a proposed single-family lot to the south of it, that'll be the second lot. The commercial business will be on its own lot, that'll be the third lot. And then the fourth lot is all the undeveloped.
Oh, I see.
This application's undeveloped portion.
But the thought is that
remaining
one
lots.
day that might be
So,
zone.
So Mr. Farrington indicated that they would continue to look at development potential in the area from Spear Street west, about 1,000 feet. But at this point in time, the general plans are to basically keep this open
Okay.
as open space.
And then the other, so I was curious about the vast, and the other question I was curious about, and I don't know if the DRB or anybody has any insight into this, in one of the previous iterations of the Webster Road bike path, they had considered a extension from Hullcrest Park and a bike path that would run along the western edge of this property and then connect and then run along the northern edge and connect to Ravine Court. And I was just curious if anything like that is still being considered, or if the zoning process would need to or could accommodate a thought about making some connections to other neighborhoods. I have a thing for paths and trails. So I was just...
Well, maybe we should have someone answer the question about VAST, and then I think Caitlin could fill you in on paths.
Okay, thanks.
The vast trail has changed a lot, vastly, because it used to come across the field, which is now the Fisher Brother Farm, and it entered our land and went down and went south, and then as it got down to Thomas Road, it built down there and everything got shut off. So I think the extent of it now is it was a corridor trail that let everybody head down to Shelburne Road and maybe go to the restaurants down there and get back up. We're all for letting VAST continue to go through our land. I think they're probably going to find other problems as they try to cross Spear Street and get onto other land that is being developed for other reasons. But as far as us letting them use our land, definitely we would.
Thank you. And Caitlin, do you want to answer the question about what's in our town plan for paths? And I don't know what the current state of affairs is with the paths, but I do know that our regulations encourage it.
Yeah, they do, and depending on what the DRB decides about this existing business, it would most likely be subject to a site plan review, and so based on what's generated off that site, there can be requirements for extending sidewalks or putting in the future ability to allow for a sidewalk or extension of existing paths. And I can pull the paths committee mapping for the next meeting to see if there's anything that can be readily connected to.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Alpert?
Gail Albert, Natural Resources.
You're still under oath.
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree. My question has to do with the undeveloped part of the property right now, and referring it in the same way to what Mr. Ashew just referred to. It would be ideal if this land, because it appears here to be forested, were to be deeded to the town or deeded in perpetuity for conservation or recreation. This project has not come before the Natural Resources Committee, and because of its proximity to the ravine, which is a water course, which I imagine goes to Monroe Brook,
Yeah.
which is an MS4 brook, I think it would be important to see what the impact of that would be with respect to water and stormwater flow and possibilities for erosion. And also to, I lost my train of thought, to have some certification that would not cause any undue repercussions. So if you were interested in coming before the Natural Resources Committee, I think we might have questions for you. And I'm not sure if, under the current regulations, this meets the standards for having to come before Natural Resources.
It does, it does.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience? We're gonna take a quick recess at 8:30 before we do our last application, so I'd like to finish this in the next few minutes if that's possible. So, my concern is that the staff is asking for a continuance to look into the legality of the business that is operating. Is that right?
Not so much at operating, it's just how it should be handled moving forward, if it should be treated as a conditional use or nonconformity, if it needs to go through site plan review. I'm just not sure how to handle it, you know.
From a procedural point of
From
view.
a procedural point of view, I don't know what the lot size should be or the setbacks, so I
Gotcha.
can't answer any of those questions without knowing if it's illegal, non-conforming. And
But you're
I-
not suggesting that there would be, well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Does everyone know, follow what Caitlin's talking about? I'm a little.
Yeah, it sounded like you were gonna get a legal opinion.
Yeah.
So, legal from the perspective of how this can move forward in the easiest manner, correct?
Well, she can't,
I know, you don't know how to classify
yeah,
it.
she can't make any, tell them what the requirements are until it gets
Sorted out.
classified as illegal, non-conforming.
So I
Or
guess
conditional.
my intent would be the least amount of government in it, the better. I mean, this is a very clean plan. We don't want to make it overly complicated.
No, but I also don't want to skim over
agree.
anything that needs to be.
Got to find that balance.
Yeah, so, and I suppose I'm also open to the idea of making sure we get that opinion before they submit a preliminary plan instead of continuing.
put
But I
effort
don't
into
think
that.
it should go too far without me being able to get a handle on what it has to be.
I'm,
Well,
go ahead, Mark.
we could authorize them to proceed, but just knowing that they proceed at their own risk. That something may come back that, if you do get some type of an opinion, that they may have to alter their plan.
So what can the ramifications be after 38 years? I mean, we're not leaving. They're gonna have to drag us out of there with a dozer, so.
No, and no, it's not
I
an
don't think
I
intent
mean,
to do
I
any.
can do whatever I can do legally too. I mean, I've been advised on this too, so
Right.
I don't think I
I
have
don't
a
think there's
problem at all.
anyone on the board who's interested in
Yeah,
having you cease your business.
yeah, okay,
And we just want to do it correctly.
right.
I kind of like
I don't think we
Mark's.
want to put another mistake on top of.
No, we don't. Neither one of us wants to spend another
Yeah.
$250,000.
all the air.
No,
I'm
yeah, we
sure.
want to try to make it,
You know,
Clean and
from
solid
a cursory look, my attorney says, you know, you're home free, and that's why we proceeded with this. But if it's a stumbling block, I mean, nothing's gonna happen in the winter, in a month or something. If you wanna do your thing, do it, but I don't know what it's gonna resolve as
Well-
far as the use.
It's just how we handle it procedurally.
Sure, that's all. If you have to do that, you have to do it. I mean, I understand that
And
too.
do you understand what Mr. Samet was suggesting, that instead of a continuance and then coming back here with an attorney's opinion, we grant you to move forward to preliminary, knowing that there's
Sure, 'cause
a risk that it's not done right? Mr. Marshall?
Just to jump in, I don't know if it's a risk of not doing it right. What I'm hearing Kate say is there may be additional levels of
Right.
review
Right.
that may be required. The fact that this would be, I propose, or I understand is going to be deemed a major subdivision means there are going to be 3 steps. So sketch plan, preliminary, and final. And there's going to be plenty of opportunities before a final approval to submit an application, whether it be a site plan approval or a conditional use or whatever ultimately is determined, to basically support the proposed subdivision of the property and ultimately a determination of what the lot size needs to be, what the setbacks will need to be to carry the day. The good news is there's plenty of flexibility around the existing business there to basically accommodate probably the worst case scenario. So that being the background, out of fairness of Mr. Farrington, I think we would be comfortable moving forward with under that particular scenario.
Okay.
I think nothing would interfere with the other lot developments that, you know, are huge lots compared to what's now
Right.
zoned there. And there'd be very nice lots, 2 and 3 acre. So that way I could authorize them to, you know, finish their surveys and isolate those lots and leave the little construction company lot to be discussed later.
it's more of a procedural and process thing
Right.
for us to clear up on our end.
Sure.
I think, than it is
Yeah, no, I understand.
on you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Ms. Elbert?
I'm just confused about whether or not they need to come before the Natural Resources Committee
do.
before you go
They
forward.
do. They do.
Yes.
And we will have
So I'm going to move to classify this subdivision application SUB 1704 as a major subdivision, and along with that, move to finalize the record, close the hearing, authorize preparation of preliminary plan application for SUB 1704, and obtain, and indicate that the applicant must obtain comments from the appropriate departments as required under section 600, subparagraph 28, and also with the provision that the applicant understand that staff is going to review the application for the proper manner of proceeding, given the historical background that's been presented to us. I'll take a second.
I will second that motion.
All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a 5-minute break right now. And then we'll take up our last application for the evening. And take up the preliminary plan review for SUB 16-02. It's at 0 Spear Street. It's a 91-unit PUD in the residential section of Shelburne. And I see that there are people here to testify in connection with this preliminary plan. Mr. Snyder and Andy, who wants to go first to talk to us about this? Oh, we have a guest.
And I
Witness.
have some
New?
exhibits that you would have to move into the record.
Okay,
Good, I
because
just
they're
got
not part of the
them
record, you just got them.
Well, I got them less than a week ago, so they have to be moved in as part of the record during.
Do you want to do that, or shall the applicant, or me? Me. Can I see it?
It's updated landscaping plans.
Can we all, are there copies for all of us?
Yes.
Do we have an exhibit name, or shall I just identify it?
I think we can just identify it, and I'll just put it into the
Okay.
record in the staff.
We're
report.
adding an exhibit to the preliminary plan for SUB 1602. It's a landscaping plan for the northern section of the subdivision, the proposed subdivision, and it's identified as a landscaping plan north.
There's the 2-page.
Oh, there's 2 pages. Oh, I'm so sorry, I thought this was Mark's copy. And then there's a second page, page 18, which is the landscaping plan south. Thank you, Jeff. So we'll take this into the record, and we'll speak to whomever is here to testify in connection with this exhibit. Can you identify yourself, sir?
I'm Brian Trembeck. I'm with Lamoureux Dickinson Engineering.
Thank you. And do you swear, raise your right hand, please, do you swear or affirm to testify in this case truthfully and accurately?
I do.
Best of your ability, okay. Are you here to talk about the 2-page exhibit we just took into the record?
Yes, I am.
Okay, why don't you fill us in? Is this your landscaping, did you prepare this?
I did, yes.
Okay,
Revisions to the plan included addressing some of the comments that were made last meeting, and this was largely the diversification of the foundation plantings.
I'm sorry, the diversification of the
Of the
foundation?
foundation plantings.
Thank you.
And that's along the right side of plan sheet 17. And also the increasing screening woody vegetation along Spear Street.
Mm-hmm. How about, what did you do for page 18, the
So-
south side?
On 18, it's simply embellishing the increasing the number of plantings between Spear Street and the proposed lots.
The idea being to create more screening.
Right, to create a green strip that interrupts views from the road to the new lots.
Does anyone have any questions for the witness? starting with you, Kate, any comments on this? I know there was concern that perhaps a landscape, or, you know, somebody who's certified, you're an engineer, sir, right?
I am a soil scientist and a wetland scientist
And Master
and
Gardener.
a master gardener.
Okay.
I thought I remembered that.
Yeah, you just have to make a determination that they're prepared by a qualified professional, and then looking for the amount, type,
Right.
yeah.
So I can't even read I can't read this. I'm sorry. It's just,
I
I
can, only because I know, you know,
what it's
what the
supposed to
plants
say.
are.
I can't,
There, yeah.
Did you take a picture with your phone?
and make it bigger?
Just kidding.
No, I think
No,
this
They're
is
fine.
much
Well,
improved.
I'm gonna ask Mr. Hodgson, ask Jeff if he has any comments. Let's start with Jeff, because he's our
No, this is,
expert on this.
they've added quite a bit, and it's a much more diversified planting plan, so, yeah. No questions?
Okay?
They
hang on.
are mostly native plants. Probably over 90% of them are. Actually, I'm trying to look for ones that aren't.
Sheet.
I think there's some of the evergreen shrubs, just because there's not a lot of choice in native evergreen shrubs. So in the evergreen shrubs for the foundation plantings, in the top two tables on the right side of the page, the juniperus communis is, the common juniper is native, but the Russian arborvitae and the Savin juniper are not. And
Green Naples?
the yew is not. But I think
Green Naples,
otherwise,
Oh, yeah, okay.
it's almost entirely native.
Well, I find that the witness is qualified to provide us with this information and this plan.
Agreed.
I agree.
Good. Does anyone else have any questions of the witness? Kate?
Oh, as far as the street trees, there's nothing that's gonna be dropping anything. This is a highway department comment onto the sidewalks. As far as like berries or nuts or.
They will always be dropping things onto the
Well,
sidewalk, whether
obviously
it be
something,
leaves,
but you know how
needles,
the, like,
twigs. There are no nut trees or fruit trees here, for example.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. I think you've answered Gail's question. Do you have any other questions for the witness? No. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, now, anything to add, Kate, with respect to the application, or should I just have Andy or Chris continue with your presentation?
Yeah, I think we can continue on in.
Is that, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, this is the only thing I recall that we had
Yeah.
questions about
Where
before.
did we leave off?
I
Yeah,
know, where did we leave off?
well, I was trying to look at the minutes, but,
Well,
We did a big chunk.
so we were,
Did we get through?
oh, that was it was sketch
think we
before.
were-
Oh, no, it was still preliminary,
We were
right?
at the zoning?
I think we got through the chunk of the subdivision regulations
thought.
and.
Right,
oh,
we
there's
did
a
9 yeah.
Blasting.
Yeah, we stopped at blasting, that's right.
At what?
Blasting.
Oh,
We did,
We did
Which-
stormwater.
Which you have,
We talked about the trenching for the utilities.
we did
just don't know,
800.
like-
the blasting,
I think we stopped at streets, I want to say.
within the subdivision regs?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, actually, and that makes sense to start there
we just
anyway.
got through 800.
that's it?
I think so,
The rest is gonna be really fast.
yeah.
Okay,
So let's get Andy up. He can let, yeah.
We did traffic too.
Yeah, we
Right,
did.
so we'll cut Brian loose if there's no
Yeah,
more discussion on
yes,
landscape.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Starting at streets, Andy, I think that's where we start.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've had some discussions with staff. All of the streets, with the exception of Street D, are proposed to be public. And Street D is the little loop, right, the horseshoe. Based upon feedback from several staff persons, the applicant is willing to make that a public street, which would involve widening it from the 24-foot width that's shown on the plans to 26 feet. I think both the highway department and the fire department are in agreement. That would require a waiver because it wouldn't comply with the 28-foot standard. That would be up to the DRB, but I believe staff supports the 26-foot width, and the applicant does as well. We do have a 60-foot wide right-of-way shown on the plans, so it wouldn't change anything in terms of layout or home position. It would just be whether the street is private or public, and would add an additional 2 feet to the width of the street.
So you'd shrink the green space as opposed to pushing the whole sidewalk out, or how would you do that?
Right, we would probably end up adding the 2 feet of width to the side opposite the sidewalk so that we can maintain that green strip.
Yeah.
The way it's shown.
Push the sidewalk out.
Right, what, you would be
Or
shrinking the,
we could add the 2 feet on the inside of the horseshoe
Yeah, inside.
and leave everything on the house side just the way it is now, and just add the 2 feet on the inside of the loop. We don't have the streets, this is similar to the Boulder Hill cross-section. The street isn't centered in the right-of-way as it is now, which really results in a nicer streetscape section, because instead of having the green space all lopsided on one side of the right-of-way, we're able to distribute that within the right-of-way and offset the street.
So Street D right now is 24 feet?
Proposed is 24 feet in private, yes.
And the other streets are how wide?
28.
28.
And that's only to comply with the public works standard.
I mean,
I don't like it personally.
No, having one private street?
No, I
No,
don't like
the-
a
how
28-foot wide highway in a neighborhood, really, it's big.
It's really wide.
Can grant waivers.
I mean,
We can?
Yes.
I
I mean,
would-
the highway department is not gonna love that at all, but
I would rather see Street D stay the width 24. I mean, that's 2 highway lanes. Seems wide enough to
So
me.
picture all the parking that's gonna be on there though.
That's the problem, is the streets get congested if people park on both sides of the street.
But I mean, there's room for at least 2 cars in each driveway, right?
Yeah, there's gonna be gas.
Right, and, just noting on Street D, because it's a horseshoe and we've only got homes on the outside of the horseshoe,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have homes on the other side that would be contributing to the on-street parking
People
when you've
could
got
pull
gatherings or
over.
at the holidays. But there is room, there would most likely be a 2-car garage for every home,
Yeah,
and then space for 2 cars in the driveway in front of the garage.
seems sufficient to me.
Well, not to get off base, but according to the New York Times, eventually you're gonna wanna just put a hidden parking lot, and we'll all just tell our cars to drive to the parking
Yeah.
lot.
So the 28-foot is 2 lanes of traffic and,
The 28 feet is the public works standard.
for 2 lanes of traffic and no parking.
No, I think the 28 feet could certainly accommodate on-street
Yeah.
parking,
Okay.
at
I'm
least
just-
on one side. But
Well,
I
if you
think
have a
that,
28-foot street going through the, if A, B, and C are 28 feet, if somebody comes to visit on D, they can park on A or B or C.
and Street D is looped, I mean, it's relatively short. We had this conversation with the fire department that, if they, for some reason, need to come here and set up, people have a short distance to get out, even if the fire department happened to be blocking the street for some reason. And that's largely true on all the other streets, you just have a longer distance to go, obviously, but.
Well, the main thing for me would be, can the fire department gain access appropriately over a 24-foot wide road if it needed to? It would seem to, 24 right
D
now.
is 24.
But you're changing it to 26, right?
Fire department and highway was okay with 26.
And you're So you're planning 26?
We were proposing to go to 26 because that's what satisfied the highway department and the fire department.
But we don't like 26.
Why don't we?
I mean,
The thing
it's-
is, they're not gonna take it over if it's not, if it's less than that. So,
Oh,
Right.
But it's proposed to be private.
right now it is, but it was also a request that it be public because if all the other
Oh.
roads are public for
Yeah. Okay.
plowing and all that jazz,
Right.
it just gets to be a little messy.
It's messy.
Got it. Well,
We had
There's the
originally
rub.
proposed sort of the same cross-section as was done with Boulder Hill, which is 26-foot wide streets and the 8-foot path. I think staff comments, not this particular staff, but the highway department and fire department were both looking for the 28 feet, unfortunately.
and the justification being,
I'm not sure about the highway department, but at least with the fire department, they want to be able to set up in the road and have enough room for a vehicle to get by, whether that's, you know, a resident or another emergency vehicle to pass it while they're set up in the road. And we did point out that, you know, just based upon the street layout in this particular development, if they were set up in any one place, traffic can just simply head in the opposite direction and still get back to Spear Street, but, you know, they prefer the 28-foot standard.
Did you ask about just putting in no on-street parking to kind of satisfy that at all with the fire department? I don't think I was there for any conversations you guys had personally.
No.
so- Okay. They really love wide roads.
I know,
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got an ordinance in town about where you can park unless it's, you can park, what is it, November 1st to April 1st, you can't park on the roads
After
Yeah.
midnight.
after midnight.
Okay, now I'm confused. I'm sorry, is it 26 that you're proposing or 28?
26 only for the horseshoe
for
room.
Yeah,
D,
For
just
D,
for D,
yeah.
right, that was my
They
question.
said they'd be fine,
But
they
if
said they'd be fine with that.
Correct. Highway department and the fire department, we checked in with both of those, and they are fine with 26 feet on Street D. If the board would really like to see 26 feet on A, B, and C, we can go back. I think Kate has more experience with the fire department and the highway department. We can certainly go back and ask, although she
so are the
may.
people of Boulder Hill at risk right now at 26 feet?
Perhaps we
I
need
see a resident of Boulder Hill in the back.
I don't think the curbs look too bad down there, and I'm not sure about fire department access. I think they, as it was explained to me, was they prefer to have the 28-foot width so that they can set up in the road and still have enough room to get that additional vehicle by, whether it's a resident or another emergency vehicle. Do they make it work in other places? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of places that they don't have 28 feet, and
The trend
a
is
lot
to
of-
go from 24 to 20 now, so, yeah.
Agreed.
It's
I mean,
traffic calming.
Traffic calming, less runoff, less capital cost.
Why don't you want any private streets?
It'd be kind of stupid. I mean, you have most of the development being plowed by the town, then you have this one street that's plowed by a guy with his pickup truck that's
Yeah,
falling
and they
apart.
have problems with them, like pushing snow out into the
Yeah.
town street, and
It's way
I've talked to
too
Paul about it a few times, and it's just, he'd
It's
rather,
easier to
it's
do it.
easier for him to just
Yeah.
do it, instead of have to deal with having to go back up there and clean up after somebody who doesn't do it.
But we could
Waiting laws.
waive the 28-foot requirement and make the whole thing 26 and have it be consistent.
Let's just make sure the fire guy's okay with it.
Yeah, I don't think we wanna undermine.
If you wanna get the fire department in here,
I,
maybe.
it's just,
It's just a wide street at 28,
You're
or
gonna
26
fly.
might do it.
I
That's,
mean,
and
that
that's a huge
invites
concern. It invites
50
speed.
miles an hour.
Yeah, there's something said about that.
No arguments.
Yeah.
But in my street,
Spear Street, what's the width of Spear Street?
It's a 60-foot right of way.
I know, but the
So,
paving,
but the paving, yeah,
well,
the paving
there's
is,
a bike path there too.
yeah.
Unfortunately, the width issue is I live on a street that's probably, I don't know, 28, 30 feet wide. If you park a car on either side of it, people still go 50 miles an hour. And you don't wanna step out between the two cars,
Yeah.
because they'll run you over, so. It's a problem.
So maybe we ask the fire chief, will 26 work without sacrificing public safety?
The other
Have them
thing-
in here for another hearing. I don't think we're gonna get through this whole preliminary tonight.
The other thing to consider is, while you guys didn't want to follow through with the independent technical review, the town still has the right to ask for it, and so Cy could recommend,
On what,
Cy-
the traffic flow?
yeah, so he could recommend something to the same effect of narrowing the roads to bring down the speed level through there. So it could be a recommendation from him as well, possibly. Or it could be a question thrown out there anyway.
I would like to hear that. I have seen some very effective traffic calming devices used. I don't know how you feel about that, Chris, as a developer, but you've seen them where you bump in the curb a little bit and it creates a little bit of a bottleneck and it slows people down. I think that's
Or,
effective.
you have a mountable curb on the side that has the sidewalk, and what if the sidewalk, is concrete or something, and then you have like 24 feet of asphalt and a mountable curb and, whatever width sidewalk, so that it can be used in an emergency, but it's not that way like every day of the year.
When you say mountable, you mean there's no big curb,
drive up.
right?
Fire truck can go up on the,
Right.
I mean, it just, I feel like this is such a major development with a lot of new roads that,
I agree with you. I think it would look nice if you had it in that fashion without, I think curbing though maybe serves a purpose of water diversion. Maybe.
Curbing contains lots of things. I mean,
Yeah.
it contains the cars to the road, not that mountable curbing doesn't either. It's a visual cue. Most people aren't gonna drive up on mountable curb.
yeah.
It contains the runoff. It just keeps everything sort of neat and tidy. Streets that don't have curb, you tend to get people parking on the shoulders. And the shoulders just don't hold up over time. Having a mountable curb and a hard surface next to that for emergency services use, I don't want to speak for the highway department, but they would need to keep that clear in the winter in order for it to be available. That may be a maintenance issue for them to, unless the sidewalk is right there, in which case they're plowing snow onto the sidewalk and then pushing it all back.
So-
There's also an advantage to having a green strip between
Yeah.
the street and the sidewalk, not just for snow storage purposes, but just sort of visually to have that green strip.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So how are we gonna address the 28 versus 26?
I would like to get the highway department in here,
I
talk
think
to,
you need to get.
or the fire and
You need to get both
police.
the fire and highway in here if we're gonna make.
I'd like to hear from the applicant
Entertain that.
about
Yeah.
how the applicant feels about what we're talking about, because
I think the original sketch plan we had, we were proposing a 26-foot wide road.
did we say 28?
And, no, and then at sketch, and then as we were going through planning for the preliminary, plat, staff said, we wanna see it meet the current specifications. So we designed according to that, because we like to follow the rules and have things not, be waived unless they need to be. I guess our preference would be to do 26 feet throughout the neighborhood.
Because,
It does help with traffic. It does, a narrower road is, in a neighborhood setting, is preferable.
agree.
I agree. I mean, this is not uncommon. We run into this everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, so the question to our departments are, do you really need it or you just kind of want it?
I don't know, I guess I'd be curious as to see how Boulder Hill went, and then, yeah, I mean, obviously it's gonna be easier. It's just easier for a highway and
Yeah,
fire to do it, but
But
there are
easy
roads that are
doesn't count
24,
when it's
there's
talking about
26.
safety.
Safety,
Safety
yeah.
takes a trump card over
I
easy.
think, I
Yes.
think you need to ask them and see what they think, and we
Get
can
them
come
all
back
in
to
here
it.
for another hearing.
Either ask them to render an opinion in writing on reducing the streets to 26, or have them come in.
I mean, if you take 2 feet off the length of all these roads, that's a lot of impervious.
Gail's all for
Probably,
a
you
second.
know,
I'm gonna take a note so we
Probably an
remember for the
acre.
next one.
Yeah.
it's probably an acre if you add it all up.
Okay, oh, here it is. Jeez, so much paper. Okay, well, let's move on then,
Okay.
knowing that we're not gonna get through.
Do you wanna pick a place to stop?
Huh?
Do you wanna just pick a place to stop now that makes sense,
Sure.
further along?
What do you mean?
Well, let's
Just
just
keep going, man.
let's just
Yeah.
keep going
We
Yeah,
had a
and
see how
super-
far we
We
got.
had a super efficient
Yeah.
first half of the meeting.
Yeah, there we go, yeah. We're energized, Caitlin.
Me too.
See,
We're
I was
good
gonna
to
have dinner
go.
before I come.
Pumped.
You're pumped?
Yeah.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, 11-1, I just want to make a note. So I think that pretty much takes us all the way into lot layout, sort of, because we've talked about streets and sidewalks, unless anyone has more to say about those items.
Street names? That's part of streets.
I think that's pretty easy.
What?
Jeff, Mark, Mary.
Oh, okay.
Does the applicant have a proposal
DR
for street name?
DRB Lane.
We'll propose some names.
Yeah, I figured that would come with the final, or is it important that the applicant propose them at preliminary? No,
Nope,
okay,
just
good.
one of the things in streets that we didn't talk
Okay.
about.
Yep.
All right. Before we move on to lot layout, I would ask the applicant if the applicant is amenable to the notion of a curbless, what did you call it?
Mountable
Mountable.
curb.
Oh.
Mountable curb. Or
I think our preference would be to leave it as a 26-foot road right-of-way with a standard curb, with standard curb cuts. That would be preferable.
Okay.
for the reasons Andy stated earlier.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to lot layout. I would say that the, we worked a lot on the lot layout. I like the lot layout now the way it is compared to how the application came in at sketch. I think it's really improved.
Mm-hmm.
Like the screening from
Yeah.
Spear Street.
Yep.
Duplexes are singles, which is great.
I think it's,
Open space is distributed.
I think it's great.
Forest is in the back.
Does
Is-
anyone,
Is lot layout an appropriate time to talk about open space, or is
Sure.
that a later?
I think that, don't we have that later?
It's its own
Doesn't
separate
matter.
area, but
The only reason I bring it up, in discussions with staff, town managers, input was, conservation easement would be, I guess, preferred. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, but, you know, with the three options being, simply covenants with the less preferred option, a town easement being the next preferred option, and then town ownership.
or a third party.
Or third-party ownership. The feedback we got from the town manager's office was, at least at this time, the town isn't interested in owning it, but would be interested in taking an easement, conservation easement, is a method of enforcing the restrictions placed upon the open space. And if the DRB wanted to provide direction on that, we could follow up with the town manager and select board as appropriate going forward.
Let's get a clear picture, if maybe we can get a screen up. Well, there it is. It's, if you would use your pointer, point out the open space to us again, just so that we have a. As it's pretty, it's not very sprinkled in. Don't you have it right up there on the wall, Andy? You can just use your pointer. And make sure you have a mic if you're gonna talk. Thank you.
So it's also this plan here that's
Oh,
hatched
that's
in the
good,
red
yeah.
shading. So it starts here at Spear Street, wraps all the way around, encompasses the wooded area on the westerly side. The stormwater pond here is on a separate lot,
Yep,
continues, picking up the old driving range adjacent to Boulder Hill, continues down. The southerly pond is within the open space, and then wraps down, back down to Spear Street behind the two carriage homes, the southernmost carriage homes.
just so the record's clear, Andy is still under oath from earlier this evening. So if I understand correctly, with an easement, any Joe Public or Jane Public can walk off Spear Street and walk into those public areas you just identified for walking or hiking or?
Yeah, subject to all the other restrictions of the open space, and it would be up to the DRB to provide input on what those limitations may be. I think the way it's structured now is it would be passive open space, so construction of a trail with an improved surface would probably be something that would be worth clarifying so that it didn't run into an issue down the road. Is there a desire to have, well, I guess a couple of other uses that should be clarified is we've got some open space. Is there a desire to have the ability to put community gardens in those areas? Or should those be left, as we talked about at the last meeting, areas that would be allowed to revegetate, sort of regenerate and just be mowed on an annual basis? Not that that would necessarily preclude a community garden, but there are some open spaces, some portion of the open space that's open, grassed area now, and some that are wooded, and there may be preferences on different uses for those two types of areas.
Okay, can you cue us up to where open space is discussed in our 17-page staff memo? I can't find it.
It is in the 1930. Point something. I'm still. So there's a 33% requirement for open space, and there's a definition for open space that guides what's supposed
You're
to be
at
on.
1930.2H. Am I right?
Yes. So if the DRB is open to the idea that a conservation easement held by the town is a good idea, I have some templates that could be used. Natural Resources could have some input as to what should be allowed in there and what not.
Okay, we can put that on for a final. How does the applicant feel about having an easement?
It's fine.
Okay, good. All right. I think that would bring us back to pedestrian access. I like the sidewalks, but I wasn't sure exactly where the 8-foot wide path is as opposed to sidewalk. Did I miss?
So the only place that we have sidewalk is along that Horseshoe Street that we were talking about, changing
Oh.
from private to public.
Okay.
All of the other streets, A, B, and C, have an 8-foot wide path along one
Okay.
side. In addition, there's also the paved path along Spear Street.
Why did you think that a sidewalk instead of a path was more appropriate for D?
Just given the short, limited length and the homes on one side.
The only reason why I ask is less sidewalk, less impervious surface, but it's not a lot of sidewalk that we're talking about compared to.
What is the path? What is the path made out of?
Paved path, 8-foot wide paved path.
Paved.
Oh.
Asphalt?
Wider, path sounds wider.
Just wider. The sidewalk has the joints every 5 feet. The paved path is more of a multi-use,
Oh, I see, yeah.
intended for multiple users. You could rollerblade.
It's gonna be an asphalt path.
Correct.
Okay.
Again,
So the
duplicating
wider one is asphalt, the other one's concrete?
correct.
Okay.
Right, so the only place there's any 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk is along
Got it.
this street. Everything else is 8-foot wide paved.
Asphalt. But that allows for nice recreation. Okay, good. So we're still at the partial, oops, sorry. We're still at the partial review, so I think we can skip over water for the time being. And I think if I recall from Chris Robinson, the sewage disposal was okay? No?
No,
He made a lot of comments.
yeah.
So there's a number of technical comments that we still need to work out with Chris, but really the major comment that he had that the applicant is exploring a few different options on is Chris had suggested as much of the project, at least the north half, and potentially as much of the project as feasible, be directed to the north. It would flow through Shelburne Heights, but the goal of Chris Robinson is to send it to the northerly treatment plant off Bay Road. They're working on a study now of the potential to abandon or eliminate the southerly treatment plant and pump all the flows to the northerly treatment plant. If the flows were to go to Webster Road, they would go through one existing pump station on Webster Road, a second existing pump station on Route 7, and then make their way to the Harbor Road treatment plant. If the Harbor Road treatment plant were eliminated in the future, all of that flow would be sent to the Bay Road treatment plant somewhere down the road at the point that southerly plant were eliminated. Even if both treatment plants stayed, Chris's point still was, we're still pumping it at least 2 more times in addition to whatever pump station may be on the project in order to get it from Webster Road to the southerly treatment plant. So he was advocating as much of the flow be directed through Shelburne Heights as possible.
I'll get to you in a second, Gail.
There's capacity for that?
Yes, he indicated that there was capacity at both plants.
No, capacity of the transmission system through Shelburne Heights.
Yes, that hasn't been a concern of his at all. In fact, he would prefer that it go that way because it flows by gravity all the way to the plant.
Understandable. I mean, is that feasible for you guys on your end? I mean, I could see where the southerly lots, that's gonna be a problem. So you're gonna have to pump it?
We're gonna have to. We would have to pump it from the southerly portion based upon his request. So there would be a proposed pump station here.
Chris, I have to stop you.
Oh,
Swear affirm everything you're about to say and everything you already said is true to the best of your knowledge.
it is.
Thank you, go ahead.
So the southerly pump station would be located here, and it would pump. So basically, this gravity would feed down to here, and then we'd pump it back up to the north somehow to connect it into an existing sewer line on Colomer Court.
How would you get there through everybody's backyard?
So it's not through everybody's backyard. There's several options, either through a side yard of a residence. There's a parcel of land. There's an easement here well, it's actually not an easement, it's a piece of land, remnant parcel here. There's also a
Whose
way,
land's controlled by,
So there was a 15-foot strip of land in this little rectangular piece here that was created with the Shelburne Heights subdivision, is still on the tax rolls, is being identified as being owned by Austin Realty with a sort of a footnote with it being column or circle common land. Austin Realty doesn't exist anymore. There's no contact available through the Secretary of State's office. We had talked with Kate about this as far as the abutter notice. So that's one of the options Chris is looking at. It's really a gore that's there now. It was owned by Austin Realty, still owned by Austin Realty, but Austin Realty doesn't exist anymore.
there's also a potential to put a force main in and come up along Spear Street, along the edge of Spear Street. So we are pursuing the different avenues. Based upon Chris Robinson's comments that we've been working through over the last 6 weeks or so, because it's.
so he's got two letters here, I assume I should be looking at the October 11th letter. There's
Yes.
two letters in here from
Yes.
Chris, okay.
And in there, basically, he's saying he wants us to find a way to pump it to the northerly station.
Great. Any other questions about that? Well, I think Gail had a comment, and we might come back to the board if more questions develop.
I do have a comment, just by way of acknowledging I live in Shelburne Heights, and when the sewer line came through, they put a sewer outlet in front of my mailbox, and every time it's moist outside, it stinks of sewage. And I've complained about it many times to Joe, and he has indicated he has talked about it with Chris and that they can't find anything wrong. But I'd hate to think that there was more coming through there. I have not recused myself from this discussion because I'm on the part of Shelburne Heights that really didn't seem to be affected by this. But I'd be concerned about it running through there.
Okay, anything else about sewage? Yeah.
I think our question is, you know, obviously the staff has requested a northerly path and interested in having the DRB weigh in as to if you feel that that's the right approach to take, or should we go with the originally proposed plan, which was to the south?
I would have to defer to Chris.
I mean, he hasn't communicated anything about this to us, so.
Other
I
than
mean,
the letter.
it's other than this letter, and I happen to know for other reasons, but, I guess my statement to the board is this may or may not happen. I mean, they're doing a study right now, but, I'm just wondering if there's I'd love to know if there's a potential adverse impacts to the transmission system between this development and the Bay Road plant, and potentially in neighborhoods.
Maybe we should have
Where it
Chris
goes
come
through.
in along with the fire and the police.
Well, I think so, because, yeah, I think we need to hear from him as far as
Yeah, it's a big one.
what the likelihood of this is, and make darn sure there's not gonna be any adverse impacts down the road. I mean, this is a pretty good load, it's 90 units.
What do you think, Kate, on this issue?
Chris Chris has been advocating this for a while. I don't really know all the ins and outs of wastewater, but I know one of the other comments he has was eliminating as much cross-country lines as possible, since it's proposed that the town will be taking over these lines. And so, I think it'd be a good idea to have him come in.
Let's get him in
because-
here and have him
Yeah,
talk to us. Okay,
because
good.
ultimately it will be the
Excellent.
town's burden to manage them.
Yep.
Okay, great. So next is utility line and outdoor lighting. Looks like the applicant's not proposing any lighting for this development.
Correct.
Not even on the intersections.
I think we may have new streetlights being added to existing utility poles at the intersections with Spear Street, but nothing along the new streets within the
Street lighting
development.
ordinance
Yeah.
that you have to comply with?
I think, thought we did.
What's it say?
A
A
lot.
lot, huh? Okay.
It depends on the district, it depends on
Yeah.
Okay.
the watts, it
Okay,
depends on a
So let's
lot.
make a note of that and have a better review of whether or not this complies with the, I think, my impression is based on prior matters that have come before us, that we try to get a balance and minimize the amount of lighting. So if we can, in my opinion, if we can do it without lighting and meet the criteria, that would be my preference. Although I do like the idea of having lights on, just, to get you in and out of Spear Street.
Yeah, definitely on Spear Street.
So I'm trying to keep a tab here, so far we want to hear, just by way of intermittent review, we want to hear from Paul Goodrich, Fire and Police on the road width, Chris Robinson on wastewater, and now we want to get a better sense of what the lighting ordinances require for the lighting proposed on this application. So this would take us to stormwater, and I want to, there are lots of comments here. Kate, do you have any concerns? I know we have this rather lengthy, looks like, permit from the state for stormwater.
I think, from my perspective, we're all set on stormwater based on South Burlington's comments. Chris added some comments about the stormwater ponds having a hard surface to access, and if there's a gate, that there's access, but I think he didn't want a gate. But other than that, it was all set, from what I understood.
Any comments or questions from members of the board? Are you proposing a gate around the ponds at all?
No fences are proposed, and we did discuss that with Chris Robinson. He wasn't advocating for gates. The side slopes of the ponds are 4-on-1, so 4 feet horizontally for every 1 foot vertically. What we did talk about, with Chris Robinson, was if the town was going to be assuming maintenance of those, or had the potential to assume maintenance for those in the future, he would like an access road, something 10 to 12 feet wide. They could have a vegetated surface over a gravel subbase so that he could get in there and get access to the forebase.
Are you planning on doing that?
We will incorporate that into both of the plans. We have it for the southerly pond, with the exception of adding some additional gravel subbase, and we'll do that on the east side of the northerly pond.
Yep, got it. Great. All right, before we lose our momentum, does anyone have any questions of the applicant with respect to stormwater?
We hit that pretty hard last meeting.
Yep. And now that would bring us to erosion prevention and sediment control. And there were plans submitted by the applicant. Does anyone have questions about those? Did staff find the plans adequate?
I didn't have any comments for them. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that to Estate and Andy.
Okay, good. Questions from the board on this?
Erosion control is primarily during construction, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And they'll have a construction permit,
Yeah, there's minimum requirements.
Okay,
and they've already got their stormwater discharge permit.
all right, moving along, I think. If I remember correctly, all of the setbacks and side yards and all that have been met, and you don't, and no one has any concerns about frontage or setback requirements?
Well, the underlying zoning has certain requirements, but since it's a PUD, they can establish alternative setbacks, and they have done that. Whether or not those are acceptable should be based on the design in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So basically, the design of the project and everything they propose has to warrant reduced setbacks. So I believe between buildings, it's 20 feet.
Correct, 20 feet minimum between buildings.
And they're not all, it's the single-family homes are on individual lots, and then the carriage homes, which are single-family homes, are on,
One
multiple
lot.
homes on one lot, and the footprint lots. And then the duplexes are all clustered into one. Or two, no, one.
On footprint lots as well.
All right, we don't have anything for footprint lots, so it's just one big lot.
All right. Anyone have any questions of the applicant on that?
As far as building height, there's no intent to exceed the 35-foot maximum, and in fact, the single-family homes might be in the 32-foot range, but the rest of them would be less
Great.
than that, most likely.
Did you guys want to take a peek at the elevations they submitted?
Sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong, single family.
Yeah, so we have a single-family home there. Again, another single-family home. Single-family home. These are carriage homes. Again, another carriage home style.
And they're single-family,
They are single-family.
they're just smaller.
They're just smaller and they're on a footprint lot versus having their own yard as part of the purchase. And then those would be the townhomes.
Oop, and that's it. That's all I got.
Where's the front door on the?
On the side.
Okay.
So you enter in from the side of the home.
Okay, I
That's
see.
the side front door.
Yeah.
Or the front side door.
Yeah.
Go back to the single-family, they don't look very, that's
Oops.
the biggest one.
Yeah, they're modest-sized single-family homes.
What's the square footage?
Up to 2,400 square feet.
Okay.
Some people may make them larger, and maybe they add space over the garage. But the home sites themselves are not large, or the building footprints aren't really set up to handle really big homes. They're moderate-sized homes. Some of the little carriage homes, although they're 1,800 square feet on the first floor, 1,600, 1,800 square feet, people do finish the basement, so it's surprising they get up to the 2,600 square feet pretty quick, but that does happen, but people do finish those basements off.
Is that the only drawing you have for the town style?
That is. They're very similar to townhomes that we built at Rivercrest Estates, and have, I think there's a total of 41 townhomes that are there.
Okay. So that would bring us, I think, to Article 5, the Stormwater Impaired Overlay District.
I think we're pretty good on that.
Yeah.
It's just gonna go through the same kind of stuff we already went through.
And do we have any concern about the Watercourse Overlay District? Your comment says there's only a very small portion of the project that's within the overlay district, and it's gonna stay open space.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep, no
great.
concerns on that.
So for site plan review, we talked a lot about traffic before.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any questions about that. Does the board?
It's mentioned again here in 1900.3. I'll just make the comment or the observation that I haven't looked at the lighting ordinance in a long time, but with an 8-foot path, yes, a lot of people are gonna stay off the streets. However, my observation is that in neighborhoods like this, when people cross the intersections and they're dark, I think it's a safety issue. I think at the very least, they ought to consider limited number of streetlights at the intersections of the internal streets.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
That's my personal recommendation, having been through some of the neighborhoods. I live in one that had lights and then didn't have lights, and now we have lights again. And it's a lot safer after the lights got installed at the intersections. It was, and even there are some corners, going around the corner, if somebody happens to be walking down the street with their dog or whatever, it can be pretty scary. I've seen people leap to the ditch before, not by my own, but other cars, you know, come zipping around the corner and, so, yeah. My recommendation is to consider putting lighting that's compliant with our ordinance, at the street, internal street intersections, and definitely at the intersections where it meets, Spear Street.
Spear, yeah,
I think
I would agree.
that's important.
Are you okay, Andy?
There's a water cooler down the hall if you want.
I've been there a couple
We've been there.
I'd be interested to hear from the applicant about lights and what your opinion, Chris, is. Not to suggest any deference to the applicant, but I do know that you've built a number of subdivisions. So what's the applicant's opinion about lights?
I think in this particular case along Spear Street, I would agree that it would make sense at the two intersections to have those lighted. I think what it does, not only does it give you visual sense, but it also, people tend to see that light and go, I wonder what that is. And so maybe they slow down, I don't know. I would say that the really the four-way intersection in where the single-family homes are, I would say that would be one place to locate a one light, a downcast light of some sort in that vicinity. And if there's a light out on Spear Street, it may help here. In this one, in that intersection, I could go either way. There are going to be some lights on the front of that garage, some downcast lights that would, they're downcast, but they do tend to spread out a little bit.
If they're on.
If they're on.
Yeah.
That's the problem, people
Yeah.
turn them off, people
Yeah.
turn their lights off, and you can't rely on.
But I would say
the
that
lights of a homeowner.
here at this intersection would be important. I think that this could be important, and we
You
could
don't really,
maybe not need one there.
If you have them at Spear,
If we
yeah,
have them at Spear.
I agree.
right,
Yeah.
okay, good, thank you. All right, anything else on this particular section? I might be able to get through it. Okay, I'm not worried about the public transit issue, so we can, if everybody's in agreement, we can move on to 1900.4, construction and post-construction stormwater management I don't think there's any issue with these anymore. Great. If the board doesn't have any questions or comments, we then move on to landscaping, and I think we just dealt with that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone okay? Moving on to pedestrian circulation and bicycle accommodation requirements?
Yep.
I think we've taken care of that as well, and so far as we know, there's an 8-foot wide path that it's almost recreational. Am I exaggerating to say that?
No, you're not exaggerating to say that.
I have a couple of questions about pedestrian circulation, and part of it was brought up when you started talking about that kind of easement to Colomer that the sewer might go through. You know, is there ever an opportunity to connect Colomer, you know, through that open space on the corner, you know, to the new path along Spear Street, or is that? I mean, if the sewer does go through there and you're putting that
I
line
think
through.
if we can figure out, I mean, maybe if this ends up being a path,
Yeah.
you know, maybe that's might be an option.
Yeah.
If we end up having to go here
Yeah.
or here
No,
in through somebody's side yard, I
No.
don't think that that's going to work.
No, it was just that idea that if that
Yes.
mystery land existed,
Yes. And
it
I
just seems like you're starting to get a really nice connectivity to Webster, and, you know, there's, Colomer Circle's a pretty big neighborhood, and just the idea that they could get over to this new path without going out onto Spear Street is kind of a nice idea, but.
I mean, the other avenue is that the town could decide to extend the bike path along Spear Street.
No, I know. There's no plans for that or anything?
Not that I know of. Past committee might have a better idea.
They've got they've got long-term plans. I don't know if that's part of it or not.
Yeah. Probably if we were applying for grants or something like that, I don't think there's anything budgeted for expanding sidewalks, but.
The other comment I had is the path along Spear, where it is adjacent to that triangular open space to the left there. I was just wondering if that path would ever just slightly veer up and, you know, kind of break the kind of straight shot, you know, if it could. No, I mean, in alignment, kind of swerve up into that open space a little bit.
Here west.
Yeah, not even that much, just a little swoop up, or, I don't know. Just seems.
Maybe 25 feet over a few hundred foot.
Yeah, yeah, you know, just to kind of,
Break up the
seems like it
visual.
would be a nice, if you're running down there, to kind of have a sweep up into
Right,
open
so
space.
you would create a little island between the
Kind of an
sidewalk and the.
eyebrow, yeah.
I mean, between the road and the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's something an architect would come up with.
I can't not, yeah, I just look at these and it jumps out at me, so.
Who's gonna end up taking care of all the paths in this neighborhood? Is the town gonna be doing that, or?
I was also curious, at what point would the path along Spear be built? You know, is it in your phasing plan, or how would it?
They had it.
With the infrastructure in phase 2.
Yeah.
Phase 2.
Okay. And phase 2 is?
It's the southern
we've
part.
gone, it may change.
Okay.
It may changes with the sewer. Originally, we were gonna go south.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Because that's where the sewer was going.
Okay.
And
I
now
see.
the sewer is going north. It may go, we may end up changing
Either way, it's
the
with
phase.
the phase 2,
It would
okay.
be with phase 2.
All right.
Okay, so I lost my spots. Pedestrian circulation rights, access requirements.
Okay, check.
We've got that, check.
I think so.
Got that, check. Traffic impact study. Now, we talked about that already, so I think we're beyond that.
Yep.
Right? Anything else to add, Kate, or anybody else from the board?
Not for traffic.
So that gets us to, open spaces site plan submitted to the board with a, everything on page 15 of the, staff report, I think, has been addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, I think we're gonna get through this before Andy dies. And the same is true for the PUD residential. Well, I think, yes, we meets that criteria. We talked about building height and the minimum front yard setbacks. Do we know what they are yet? Not necessarily. Is that what we talked about a little bit earlier? You're not clear that it's the,
It kind of depends on where
Which-
you're looking.
right, the
exactly.
carriage. Can I
And
get,
I think it will depend on where those buildings actually get
yeah,
sited on. each
hear
of
a
the
little bit
lots.
more about that.
Yes, so there's building envelopes for the single-family homes, and so those homes can be shifted within the building envelope, forward or back, depending upon the home style and what's going to be placed on that envelope. In terms of the carriage homes, the building footprint
Is a lot.
it's a lot, so the house, the front of the garage or the porch will most likely be right close to that front lot line. And then there'll be the decks and patio spaces out the back will still be within the building envelope. So those envelopes don't really change, and those houses pretty much sit pretty close, within a foot or two of the lot line. The same would be true of the townhouses. Those would be the same thing, where the front of the house or the garage or porch would sit within a foot or two of that front building envelope.
The front yard setbacks are 30 feet for the single-family homes and a minimum of 25 feet for the carriage homes and the duplexes. Depending on how that porch and the garage relate to one another, it may be more than that, but there'll be a minimum of 25 feet so that there's plenty of room
Excellent.
from the edge of the right-of-way to the garage for a vehicle to park.
But it sounds like the fronts of the buildings will vary a little bit. They won't all be in like a perfectly straight line.
Well, there's two things that are going on here. One, we have lots of roads that are not straight. So
Yeah.
no matter what we do, they won't be straight. Other than there's one section of road that I would say is probably right here where they're a little bit straighter. Now, what happens is houses change orientation. So the garages could be on the, most likely will be on the uphill side. And then the front door access point is typically on the downhill side. For ease into people's garages so that we don't have too much slope. And so those will flip, and they'll flop the other direction
Yeah.
where the garage is on the uphill side.
I think we're done. I'm just looking at page 17, design standards for PUDRs. I guess, Gail, we've already talked about the conservation easement, so I don't think you have anything to add here, do you?
No, not at this point.
Okay. So I don't have any further questions for the applicant.
I had one question that had to do with where the sewer line might go through. Do those people now perceive that that's all private land? Have you spoken with them?
Yes.
Yes to both questions.
That is correct. we have talked to, we have currently spoken with one person at this point, and that's it. There will be other discussions to be had, but
So unless there's anything else, I would move to continue so that we can hear from the folks we want to hear from and get a better sense of the lighting ordinance.
We have highway and fire.
Yeah.
And police? Well, I guess we don't really need police for the roads, sorry. And then we wanted to meet with Chris Robinson on the sewer.
Right. Does he also do water, or is that's different?
That's right.
That's Rick Lewis.
We don't necessarily need water, they've got their own thing they're
They've
figuring
got
out.
they've got to undo a lot of issues first.
Yeah.
So do you want to continue until the 15th?
Let me just get there, so make sure I can,
can I ask a question? Do you want them to attend, or do you want us to try to have written responses from,
I think we want them to attend.
okay,
Or at least be available
By
for a
phone.
call-in?
Yeah.
That way
So-
we can ask questions directly of them.
And Kate, you know, one of the big concerns or thoughts are 28 feet going down to 26 feet. Again, is it okay, or is it just something that they really like? Because we have a preference to go narrower because it slows everything down, makes it safer,
And it's less impervious.
less impervious.
I mean, 2 feet over the length of
Oh,
this, it's like an acre or
Sure.
so.
Sure.
As far as those two goes, I'd be fine with getting their written comments from Jerry Wimet and Paul Goodrich.
If they support 26 feet, yeah, if they need 28 feet, then
We might have questions.
we might
Yeah.
have questions.
We can just ask them to be available by phone, and we can call them if we have questions based on what their report says.
Sure.
Should we do that? Is that adequate?
That'd be fine with me.
Can we get that fancy speakerphone?
I'd encourage people to drive around, go through Boulder Hill and, become familiar with
Okay.
road widths.
I'm gonna measure my street.
Go through where?
Boulder Hill.
Boulder Hill,
Oh, okay.
because that's 26, right?
Okay, good. And then we would hear from Chris about the waste, same
Wastewater.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have them be available by phone if we have questions. Excellent.
Okay,
So,
so,
the
so with
15th is
Chris,
fine.
so with Chris, he had a change of mind, and he wants to go
He wants to go
north
north.
now. So we need to understand, is he like rock firm solid, that's the way we should go, and here's good reasons why?
And he
we can
feels
back
like
him
there's
up.
capacity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to get an idea of what the likelihood of this is gonna be. I mean, up until recently, this was an idea, and he's gonna start. The input on further projects are gonna start to reflect that long-term plan. I'd like to hear more about what the likelihood is. Is it 5 years? Is it 15 years? Is it a 30% chance or an 80% chance? And how far have they looked into some of the potential adverse impacts it's gonna have on pushing that capacity through neighborhoods like Pearson Drive or Colmer Circle up
Are
there.
they trunk lines that go through those neighborhoods, or just, are they supposed to be able to handle that flow?
Well,
I guess that's the question.
that's a
That's
good
the question.
question.
Got it.
That's a pretty good
Yeah.
surcharge.
It goes along the road and then hops back behind, I think, the St. Weber and the McIntosh home, and then goes down. So it goes through their yards, I think.
Does it go down and connect down through like Hillcrest down below that way?
I think it goes down through,
The Farrell
too
prop?
late to remember the name of the road. There's a it goes down the hill,
Logan Court,
Logan
yeah.
Court, yeah. And then it goes down the hill through the woods, to my knowledge.
Oh, it goes, okay, down through there, okay.
Great. So, yeah, the 15th is fine. Oops, sorry.
Okay.
So I will move to continue the hearing to November 15th. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. And do we have any other business? You sent us some, so that's it for our agenda on applications. You sent us some proposed findings on the bed and breakfast. Haven't had a chance to read them yet.
Yeah, sorry, I was late on that.
And then I see that there's a pile of stuff here for, just gonna keep this stuff.
Do we have things to sign?
I'll take the motion to adjourn, thank you.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I was gonna ask, but I got distracted if there was any other business, but.
Do we have
Hold on.
anything to
Thank you.
sign? or-